everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar. We are excited to share supports and systems for improving access to and sustainability of family child care. I'm Jen Bender with the BUILD Initiative, and I'm handling the logistics on today's call. Audio for today's webinar is being broadcast through your computer speakers. Please ensure your speakers are turned to a comfortable volume. If you have any questions or comments throughout the session, please type them into the chat box. The presenters will monitor the chat and provide responses as they are able or following the call. At the conclusion of this webinar, you will be redirected to a survey. We encourage you to take a moment to provide feedback about this webinar so that we can improve. This webinar is being recorded. After the webinar, you will receive an email with a link to the webinar recording and PowerPoint. And with that, I will turn it over to Michelle Adams.
Thanks, Jen. Good afternoon. The National Center on Early Childhood Quality Assurance is pleased to bring you today's webinar on supports and systems for improving access to and sustainability of family child care. Today we'll be introducing you to the last two resources in our Family Child Care series. They focus on key considerations for engaging family child care providers and assessing policies and practices that promote access to high-quality family child care options. The National Center on Early Childhood Quality Assurance provides training and technical assistance to state and community leaders to support the health, safety, and quality of early childhood settings. The Center encourages the development of strong licensing regulations and quality initiatives and culturally and linguistically responsive policies and procedures. We're very pleased to welcome today our three presenters for today's session. Amanda Zacchelli is, Amanda Zacchelli, there it is, thank you. Amanda Zacchelli is a Senior Technical Assistant Specialist at 0 to 3 and the author of the Policy Assessment Tool we'll be introducing today. At 0 to 3, Amanda provides technical assistance to states on their infant-toddler policy priorities, and she facilitates the work of state-level planning groups and develops research-based resources for policymakers. Prior to joining 0 to 3, Amanda worked at the National Governors Association Center for Best Practices, where she designed and implemented policy projects to inform governors' early childhood policy agendas. Harriet Feldlauffer is the Director of the Division of Early Care at the Connecticut Office of Early Childhood and serves as the State Administrator for the Federal Child Care and Development Fund in Connecticut. Prior to joining the Office of Early Childhood, Harriet was the Bureau Chief in the Connecticut State Department of Education, where she was responsible for early child education, family engagement, and strategic planning. Erica Phillips brings a diverse set of business and education experiences to All Our Kin, a leading social enterprise in early education. As a Chief Operating Officer, Erica is responsible for strong program implementation across multiple sites, ensuring fidelity to All Our Kin's nationally recognized model for improving the availability and quality of home-based child care, and she's responsible for leading All Our Kin's expansion into new markets. Prior to joining All Our Kin, Erica founded Second Home Early Child Care, which prepares children and family child care for lifelong achievement. I'm Michelle Adams with the National Center for Quality Assurance, and I'll be your facilitator for today. And in an effort to keep our webinar to 1 hour, we are going to ask you, I'll repeat what Jen said about typing your questions into the chat box. And if time permits, we'll answer questions at the end of our webinar. Otherwise, we'll capture your questions and respond to you individually through the email address you provided at registration. There we go. Okay, I am very pleased to introduce you to our fourth resource in our Family Child Care series, which is titled Policies and Practices supporting access to high-quality family child care. This policy assessment and planning tool for states, territories, and tribes is designed to guide local, regional, and state efforts in promoting access to high-quality family child care options. We're going to start with Amanda today. Amanda, thanks for joining us. In the many states, the foundational elements of quality are established through licensing requirements, and higher levels of quality are established in a quality rating and improvement system or in quality initiatives. But we do know that oftentimes licensing and QRS requirements, coupled with zoning laws, fire and health regulations, neighborhood association restrictions, may have a negative impact on our ability for family child care homes to operate. Amanda, as the author of the policy tool, tell us how it can help a state or other entity better understand the impact these requirements can have on the availability, quality of home-based care.
Sure. This tool was intended for policy leaders to use so that they can better understand their state's strengths and challenges and opportunities, and also as a way to prioritize their next steps for policy and systems change. So it can really be used as kind of a strategic planning tool if you're looking broadly at your system and how to improve access to quality family child care. And I hope folks can hear me. I know I'm seeing some challenges in the chat box. Can folks hear me?
Yes, you can go ahead.
Okay. Looks like there's some folks that are having trouble. So the assessment has 4 key steps to action, 4 sections that I'll walk through today. And as you can see up on your screen, Section 1 is intended to help users explore the infrastructure and the data needed to better understand the family child care context in their state. The second section is the policy section, focused on the 4 key policy levers that states have that they can use to support access to high-quality family child care. The third section focuses on assessing any existing initiatives that you have in place to support family child care. And the fourth section is a focus on outreach to the full range of providers so that any of the above policies and initiatives are really successful in reaching the full range of providers. Next slide, please. So before exploring policies to promote family child care, we thought it was really important to assess whether your state or community has the basic systems in place to support access to high-quality family child care, and whether you have the data to inform policy decisions. So if you go to the next slide, you can see a screenshot of the section on systems and infrastructure. This is just the very beginning of it. There's a lot more in the tool that I hope you'll have a chance to take a look at. And so this is an example looking at some of these big picture infrastructure pieces. If you have statewide strategic plans, early care and education advisory councils, is family child care fully included in these plans and these groups in a meaningful way? Do you have the various places where data is collected in your state? Is family child care included? These are the types of items that are in this section. We also look at whether you have processes in place to gather input from family child care providers, processes in place to conduct research and evaluation. So we think this is a really important foundational piece of this kind of strategic work. If you go to the next slide, there is this section also does a much deeper dive into data. So we know that the family child care landscape varies considerably across states, and it can be really critical to gather data that's specific to your jurisdiction and can help inform appropriate policy development. So what you see on the screen, again, is just a snapshot of the section on data. This is really a pretty deep dive into the various data points that we think would be most helpful to inform a family child care strategy. So it includes other items such as understanding the number of children that are in care of different types of family child care providers, whether use of family child care providers vary by demographics, home language, the child's age, race, ethnicity, or relationship to the provider. availability of care by location, the average cost of care, and the professional development and technical assistance needs of providers. So, so again, this is a really rich section. It's intended, as you can see from the screenshot, of being a way to do an inventory of what data you currently have, whether it's fully available, somewhat available, and then helping to identify those gaps where additional data might need to be collected. Next
Thanks,
slide,
Amanda.
please.
So states have several policy strategies that they can use to influence the quality and supply of family child care to better support children and families. Amanda, can you briefly explain what those policy strategies are?
Sure. So what you can see on this slide, we think there's 4 key systems, 4 key levers, particularly at the state level, I think for some of you also at the local community level, that you can use to influence family child care quality and access. These are 4 key levers that are used in a number of different child care policy conversations, but in this tool we have a section on each of these: licensing and monitoring, QRAS, professional development, and child care subsidy policy, and dig into what it looks like to have a best practice or a benchmark for effectively supporting family child care through these systems. Next slide, please. So here's an example, a screenshot of the beginning of the licensing and monitoring section. And this is really, you'll see just kind of some foundational questions about licensing. The tool itself gets a lot more in-depth about what licensing regulations look like, how they're implemented, as well as the other key areas. For each of these systems, the policy benchmarks and indicators are intended to be aligned with CCDF priorities, recognized in the field as best practices, and grounded in available research. And the idea is, again, that you can review your own policies against these benchmarks, take a educated guess or a best choice of implementation status. It may not be. Sometimes this may be a difficult choice exactly where you are, but looking at whether you're fully implemented, partially implemented, not implemented, or if this is not applicable in your state, and include some comments on anything that's specific to your context. Again, this is a really rich section with a lot of information that we didn't include in this PowerPoint, but just to give you a sense of what's in here, there's information on what kind of content is recommended within professional development, as well as how that professional development can be accessed by family child care providers. There's information similarly on QRAS, what kind of quality indicators, as well as how it should be implemented to be accessible. And then some interesting and innovative strategies within subsidy policy to incentivize and better support high-quality family child care. Next slide, please. So the next section is focused on initiatives to support the supply and quality of family child care. This includes what you see on your screen and what we've talked a lot about in the work that came out of this series is staffed family child care networks, as well as networks and associations, shared service model. At the next slide, there's some additional examples. Early Head Start child care partnerships, partnerships between providers and ECE initiatives, and a range of other initiatives that provide everything from financial business support, accreditation support, coaching, home visiting. The intention of this section is to catalog existing efforts. What we find often is that there are many of these initiatives are happening at different levels. Some may be happening out of the state child care office, while others may be local or community-based, supported by foundations, supported by the providers themselves. And so this section is intended to catalog what existing initiatives are in place to get a better sense of to what extent current family child care providers are being reached by these initiatives and where there may be gaps. And then to also help you think about whether there may be ways to better coordinate some of these existing initiatives so that they can work together towards some common goals. Next slide. So the final section, and this is really critical, and I think you'll hear more from the other presenters today about outreach to the full range of providers. So you can have a really ideal set of policies in place and initiatives in place and still kind of miss the mark if you're not reaching out to a full range of family child care providers, including license-exempt providers, relative care providers, those in the most high-need communities. Many of our providers who are immigrants and speak languages other than English. And without outreach and efforts to boost family child care supply and quality, may really miss some of these important segments of child care providers. Next slide. So, and I'm sorry, maybe I wasn't ready for the next slide. Sorry. So the tool was intended to track whether your state has outreach policies and practices that support all family child care providers. So similar to some of the other sections that we've shown you, there's a number of best practice benchmarks that we include here, including access to information outside of typical business hours, which is when family child care providers may be occupied with working with young children, caring for young children, supporting for those who are caring for children with special needs, helping family child care providers connect with sources in their community that they trust instead of folks who may be coming in from the outside, and a lot of good tips about connecting to family child care providers who speak different languages. Now I'm ready for the next slide. And this is our final, the final piece of the tool is an action planning tool. And we just want to make sure that those of you using this tool, that it's a really action-oriented process for you. That after completing the sections of the tool, you can review all responses and fill in for each of the 4 sections some key action steps that have bubbled up as a result of filling this out. Next steps, and really kind of map out how you want to move forward with those next steps. And so we hope that you'll find this tool helpful in your system planning to improve access to high-quality family child care programs. And I will turn back to Michelle.
Great. Thank you so much, Amanda, for walking us through the different parts of the tool. Because we're committed to continuous quality improvement, we've inserted some poll questions to get a quick feedback or check on you about what's helpful. Our first poll question is, based on today's overview, would you be interested in using the policy assessment tool? If you'll do a quick answer for us, we'd appreciate your input. Okay, we're not going to show the poll results today. We're going to move forward now instead to keep on track with our next guest, Harriet Feldhofer. Harriet, thanks for joining us today. I know that your team in Connecticut's been working on a number of supports for family child care. Will you share with us some of the initiatives that you've explored to increase the supply and quality of family child care, and how you and your team determine which ones to offer to providers in your state?
Sure. Thanks a lot, Michelle and folks, for including Connecticut. Just a little bit of context, the Office of Early Childhood is a fairly new executive branch agency in Connecticut. We were created about 3.5 years ago, so we're pretty young. We're kind of like just preschoolers now. And the mission of the agency is to support all young children in their development by ensuring that early childhood policy, funding, and services strengthen the critical role of families, providers, educators, and communities that play a role in child's life. We have a strategic plan, and in our plan, our goal is to ensure universal access to high-quality infant toddler care. And with that goal in mind, we actually wrote in several strategies to achieve this goal in our 2016-18 CCDF plan. We're using a theory of change that really focuses on a combination of business practices, business pedagogy, and early care and education pedagogy to advance the delivery of high-quality infant and toddler settings. And so we're engaged in a process that is really systematically assessing and improving the overall quality of care for infants and toddlers. So if you think about this model as, business plus practice pedagogy, we have 4 strategies that we outlined, and I'll talk about a couple of them in a little more depth. But one is in general just ramping up and increasing the physical training and supports we provide to family child care providers. Another strategy that we engaged in was offering a train-the-trainer session on PITSI, the Program for Infant and Toddler Care, the federal model, that's based on 6 essential program practices to promote responsive, caring relationships between caregivers and the infants and toddlers they serve. And then we have 2 other strategies, and these are new. The ink is wet, and they're very, very new. In fact, we're just launching them right now. One is a strategy around facilitating shared services in our state, and the other is exploring staff family child care networks. So I'll highlight those in a little more detail. For the shared family services work, we have partnered with Connecticut Philanthropy. We have a group called the Connecticut Early Childhood Funders Collaborative, and they are helping to sponsor an event actually in January. January 10th is our kickoff, to explore opportunities for a shared services alliance in our early childhood community. And the purpose of a shared service alliance is to really share cost savings encumbered by programs, and also to increase revenues among participating centers and homes in order to reinvest these dollars into improving program quality. So we are engaging into a contract with Opportunities Exchange, and working with Louise Stoney to offer a session for about 75 providers in January, weather permitting, to actually provide an introductory shared services 101, we're calling it, followed by 3 concurrent breakouts to explore shared service examples much more deeply. So we're working with Libby Popick and Sharon Easterling and Louise Stoney to design and implement this shared services symposium, and that's in January. The other strategy that we're exploring, and the ink is still wet, is issuing an RFP for developing staff family child care networks in Connecticut. And this was also a goal identified in our CCDF plan. We'd like to create 2 or 3 or 4 community-based staff family child care networks. And a staff family child care network is a community initiative that has paid staff with expertise in working with family child care providers who can deliver a menu of ongoing support services and resources to affiliated family child care providers. So we're dedicating some federal funds and also state funds to support a pilot. We're going to be issuing an RFP in early 2018. The ink is still wet. And the RFP is going to put out a framework that we would like various entities to respond to. I mean, the framework is fairly simple. It says basically that the networks are to be located in communities, and they are to establish services and resources with local partners. So it's very much community-based for provider by provider networks. The framework also calls for identifying a specialized trained coordinator for the family network, to offer training at the network site and follow-up coaching, and to also engage in a formal assessment process of the network. So as I said, we're really getting ready to release this RFP, and we are gathering our review team and developing a rubric, and we hope to have many, many applications come in, and then we'll see, based on the location in the state and what these networks really can provide, where the need is and what their proposal is like. So we'll have a better idea in a few months of where that lands. But that's really exciting work for Connecticut. So again, it's this 4-strategy model around fiscal pedagogy and care and education pedagogy. That is, get the business training and fiscal practices strong with family care providers who are business owners, then get a deeper understanding of training around relationship-based responsive care for providers, offer the shared services model, and then pilot several staff family child care networks to support family child care providers. So that's our model.
That's great, Harriet. Thank you so much for sharing that. It's very exciting to hear the progress that Connecticut is making, and we'll be following you to see how you move forward. I had another question for you. We know that family child care providers have very diverse and unique needs. Were there some special strategies that you and your team used to reach out to providers, perhaps those that are in high-need communities, or providers who speak languages other than English, or providers who work those long hours that makes it very difficult for them to attend training and support meetings?
Yeah, you really hit the nail on the head. That is the goal of the staff family child care networks. Again, where they're going to be located in communities with established partners in communities, trusted partners. We know that we have some very rural parts of Connecticut with very poor transportation, both for children and families and the providers themselves. And as you know, as you said, they're working long hours. So we really see these staff networks being actually embedded in the community and being a fabric of the community. And we're hoping to get proposals from existing networks, because we know, in fact, one of our partners on this afternoon is from AOK, and also perhaps other providers like family resource centers. We know that there are entities in Connecticut that are providing resources and services, not necessarily in a structured family child care network model, but we definitely will be embedding this work in the community. And so that is how we hope to really serve both diverse populations and providers that are really isolated and actually feel pretty alone in this industry.
Thanks, Harriet. It sounds like you and your team have really put a lot of thought into your strategic plan, and certainly for the networks. I did have one last question for you. I wanted to thank you and your team. You were kind enough to review the policy tool for us and provide us with some feedback. Do you have any advice that you'd like to share with potential users?
Sure. It was very thorough. So Amanda, thanks for all the great work. I hadn't realized at the time that you were the brains behind some of this, but super thorough. And, you know, with the CCDF plan being incredibly comprehensive, there are 8 sections, and you really need to be paying attention to all age group and sectors in all aspects of your plan. We found it really helpful when we went through the draft tool to really do almost a self-assessment, a needs assessment of where were we in terms of supporting family, child care, and infant toddlers throughout our plan. And after we did the self-assessment, we see it as really advantageous for states to actually dig in and figure out where there are no what are the gaps? Where are there no policies or practices? Where are there ones that have lots of opportunities, but maybe they're not yet realized? And where are you doing a really good job? Like, where's that benchmark being met? And then how do you share that with others? So I think it's a great planning tool. It's a great tool for mapping implementation, and I also think for reporting out to stakeholders about where you are. So we found it super useful.
Great. Well, we do appreciate the time that you spent giving us the feedback. And thank you so much for being with us today to share information about Connecticut.
Sure. You're welcome. It's our pleasure.
We're going to move forward to our fifth and last resource in our series on family child care. It's titled Engaging Family Child Care Providers and Quality Improvement Systems. This brief answers 3 questions about building systems inclusive of family child care. What are the challenges that states have to overcome when reaching out to providers, and what lessons can we learn from the past initiatives, and what outreach practices can effectively engage providers in quality improvement initiatives? And we've invited Erica Phillips today to share some information with us about engaging family child care providers. Erica, the aim of recruiting and successfully engaging providers in these quality improvement initiatives is to, including those that are licensed, registered, and legally exempt from licensing, we know that this is really a challenge. As a Chief Operating Officer of All Our Kin in Connecticut, you've implemented a successful system of supports for providers. Could you tell us briefly about your strategy for engaging your family child care providers in your area to participate in your program?
Great. This is Erica, and I am from All Our Kin. And we started in Connecticut in one community in New Haven almost 20 years ago, and have since grown to 3 networks serving 400 family child care providers and 2,400 children. Most of our providers are supported through, similar to what Harriet was talking about beforehand, staffed family child care networks, although we also have a early Head Start child care partnership in New Haven. So I'll touch on some of the strategies that we've learned over time as we have started some new networks and new communities. In all our work, we take a strength-based approach, and we deeply respect the family child care providers' knowledge, time, and their unique role. So this means when we offer professional development, we work really hard to ensure that it's tailored to family child care providers. It's offered in the evenings and weekends. It's easily accessible. It may seem simple, but even moving a professional development training 10 minutes closer to a particular community will result in a huge increase in participation, because after really long days, providers don't want to have a long commute to go to a training, and so really thinking about making those trainings as accessible as possible. We always leverage professional development opportunities used in other early childhood settings. In the beginning, we took trainings designed for centers or home visitors or even parents and used it for family child care providers. And over time, in feedback from our amazing providers, they really pushed us to tailor the professional development to their needs. So now we ensure that all of the professional development we do touches upon a few things. First, they have mixed age groups, so making sure that the trainer is speaking to that part of their work, that the training is focused on infants and toddlers, because that's the age group that many of them have the most children, and ensuring that whatever is being taught, it can translate well to a small home environment, in an environment where the children and the families that they come from may speak multiple languages. And the other thing that is unique to the providers is that often they'll have children coming non-traditional hours. So how do you meaningfully engage children in those very early hours, or children who might be staying late at night? And when the training is tailored to some of their unique needs, they're more likely to come out and get value from it. Additionally, it's just a small thing, but when trainers use videos and pictures, we ask them to include family child care settings as much as possible, and also infants, toddlers. They're also wearing many hats that most other early educators aren't wearing. So the provider is also the business manager. So if we're showing a cool resource, we also want to make sure that we explain how the provider can actually acquire this. It's simple, but make and take sessions are great. Providers really get a lot out of that. Additionally, they are the person that's doing the cleaning. So a provider may be hesitant to take on a messy activity, but if you have another provider talk about how they do activities that might be a little messy and they still manage the cleanup, providers will get more comfortable with this idea. And so sometimes you have to take different approaches to say the same thing to family child care providers. And we always take a strengths-based approach in all of our engagements. Family child care providers, and many of us often hear what's wrong with their program or that the quality isn't as high, and so we try and flip this paradigm in all that we're doing and making sure that they understand what strengths they have, whether it's their many years of experience in very diverse settings or the fact that they're able to build relationships with children and families that are hard to reach. And we start with this strength and build from there. The next thing that has been really helpful to us is just having multiple engagement strategies. We engage our providers in multiple settings. They regularly come to our office and training space, but we also are in their home. Our educational coaching and our business coaching is done in the provider's home, and modeling and coaching is incredibly valuable. And it's really powerful when you can connect the in-class lesson to the provider's home. And additionally, we support providers in visiting other programs so that they can see how another program is set up. And it goes back to the strength-based approach because the provider who has visitors is able to feel proud of what she's been able to do in her program. We are able to offer a number of financial incentives. I wouldn't say that is the main reason a provider will continue to engage in quality improvement initiatives. However, it is often an initial incentive to have a provider participate. We support providers through the Toolkit licensing program, and we offer material to help them get licensed. We also provide materials with in our coaching programs. The coach, along with the providers, they set goals and they decide collectively what materials will help them to reach higher levels of quality. And then in programs like Early Head Start, there's a steady supply of children, which is a good exchange for meeting the much higher standards in that program. And one of the things that is most important to engagement is just the network and the social supports that providers get from the work that we do. As an example, a few years ago, we decided we wanted to move in the direction of only offering multi-session series, since we know that is the most effective way to learn rather than doing a one-off session. However, in our newer networks, the providers were still adjusting to having regular professional development opportunities, and we were still engaging new providers, so it was really hard to plug everyone into a series. And so in those situations, we ended up still doing the series, but also offering a monthly professional development training on different topics. And providers would engage in that, and eventually we would get them into the longer sessions. Additionally, in our older networks, even though they were, the providers were very much engaged in the multi-session series, they still wanted a larger social convening where they can reconnect with all providers. And so we still offer a couple of larger gatherings where all of our providers can get together and they can see each other. They can talk about the progress that they've made over the last year or months since they've seen each other. And finally, our providers, they do feel very comfortable in our space. It's very much community-based. We connect with as many resources in the community and bring those to the providers. Most of the providers that we work with voluntarily participate because they want to provide the best experience for their children and families. So we make sure that we are celebrating their cultures, celebrating the cultures of their families, providing materials in multiple languages. This is really deep work that may call into question some things about how they were raised or how they raised their children, and getting somebody to make really meaningful change will require them to be vulnerable, and it will require them to try out things that they might be afraid of trying. And so doing that with a really trusted partner is the way that we found to have the best impact on the providers.
Thanks, Erica. That is some great work that you all are doing at All Our Kin. I'd like to ask one follow-up question if I could. As far as reaching out to providers that are in the business but are not licensed, are you going out, are you using media to reach out to them? Are you going to community meetings, or is there any special way that you're reaching out to these providers?
That's a great question. So we spend a lot of time going out into the community. We connect with other community organizations. We connect with schools who have families who may be taking care of children, some of the younger siblings. We connect with any events where families or parents, there's a lot of fairs and events where a lot of families are at, and we always have a table there, and we're building those relationships in order to have more people come into our network, maybe become licensed if that's the right step for them. Over time, word of mouth becomes the most frequently used way that we connect with people, but being new in a community, it's really being on the ground and connecting with as many different agencies and events where families might be at.
Great, thank you. I didn't mean to put you on the spot, but I appreciate that because I know that that is part of the challenge of the work, is that first initial reaching out to folks and accessing them in an environment that they feel comfortable in, and then introducing them to the resources that they can tap into. So thank you so much, Erica, for sharing the work that you're doing there at All Our Kin. Let's look at another poll question if we can. How much has your understanding of access and quality in family child care improved during this webinar? If you'll take just a couple of minutes to select an answer. Thank you. We appreciate input from you all. It helps us to improve our webinars in the future. We do have a few minutes left in our hour for a question or two that's come into our chat box. So I will try to share a couple of those. And Harriet, I think this one of these questions is for you. If you're still there, perhaps you'd be available to answer this question about... Sure. Okay, this question is, does Connecticut have a child care resource and referral system?
Yes.
And then related to that question, is the Family Child Care Network like a child care resource and referral agency?
So I see a question that says, does Connecticut have a CCR&R, and are these networks in addition to? We do have a CCR&R, the United Way of Connecticut, and we do consumer education, and we are Care for Kids subsidy program, lots of provider training. We are sort of piloting a quality improvement system. We decided to carve this new work on staff family child care networks and have it overseen directly by me and my staff, because we felt it was important to really sort of babysit it for a while. We assume that once we have several that are up and running and we have a better idea of how the framework is being implemented and how well it's going based on the evaluation, that this could in fact be an activity that is funded through our CCR&R down the road, and part of our quality improvement system. But right now it's small and it's sort of new for us, and it was in our CCDF plan. The CCR&R does a ton of work for us on our development plan, and this is I guess an area where we really felt we wanted to do a little more hand-holding. But good question.
Great. Thanks for elaborating on that. We have another question about whether a copy of the slides will be available. And Jen Bender, who's supporting us with our technology today, she said that following the conclusion of the webinar, everyone will receive an email with a link to the PowerPoint and the webinar recording. Any questions that we don't get to today, we'll be happy to respond to and share the questions with you via your email address. And I don't see, let's see. We have another question about getting a copy of the curriculum that's used in providers' homes. And I think perhaps that question might be directed to you, Erica. Are you still with us?
Hi, yes, I'm happy to answer, yes. So outside of our Early Head Start program, we don't dictate which curriculum the family child care providers are using. Many providers use the creative curriculum through family child care. Some over the years have, along with our support, tailored curriculum to their program. We do offer trainings on developing curriculum and really pushing them to build the curriculum from their observation of children. So we don't have a set curriculum that most of the providers are using. The other thing I will say is that we do use the Family Child Care Environmental Rating Scale for our coaching work, and so at the beginning and the end of an engagement, the providers are assessed using FICRs, and the coach and the provider set their goals using FICRs.
Okay. This is an interesting question, and I think any of you could answer this, Harriet or Amanda or Erica. Are there examples where foundations partner with state agencies to support this kind of work? Are you aware of a partnership between foundations and state agencies?
Well, yes, in Connecticut, I mentioned that we're working with, we have an Early Childhood Funders Collaborative, and it's a collection of about 10 or 12 small and large philanthropic agencies that have an interest in early childhood. So they have helped support, they are helping to support some of the fiscal training that we did. They're helping to support the one day, January 10th, the shared services kickoff. And we have actually a few other proposals into them related directly to this work. It's been a great partnership. So yes, we are we're not getting, tens of thousands of dollars, but we are getting both cash and in-kind support, yes.
And those partnerships are very important. Erica, we have one other question for you about back to curriculum, and I think the question this time is about the curriculum that all our children use in working with providers in the provider's home. Is there something in particular that you all tap into? Not necessarily the curriculum that the provider uses, but the curriculum that all our kin uses in working with providers?
Yes, I think there's 3 different places where we use, I would use the word curriculum loosely. The first is the process or the materials that we use for providers who are going through the licensing process, so new providers, and that does extend beyond just completing the requirements for the state licensing, but really setting a foundation for becoming an early childhood educator. And so that is something we've developed, and I can share that in some of the information about our toolkit licensing program. In the actual program, when we're doing the coaching with the providers, we do it based off of the Vickers assessment. And I forgot to say, for the business practices, we use the business administration scale, which is put out by Erickson. And so those are the 2 assessments that we use, and our coaches work with the providers to develop the provider over the course of the engagement. And then the third piece is for our trainings that we offer at our location, and that we just determine every year. We work with trainers throughout the state to identify what's the best available resources and what are the provider needs. So those aren't set. We decide them each year, what we're going to focus on for that year, and then we'll go out and find the appropriate trainers for that.
Great. Thank you, Erica. I appreciate you answering that question for us. We'll take one last question, and I'll direct this one to you, Harriet, if you feel comfortable answering it. The question is, does your licensing partner support your quality assurance efforts in, sorry, I lost the question there. Does your licensing partner support your quality assurance work in Connecticut?
I don't know exactly what that means, so I'll say yes. Our licensing, our child care licensing division is in our Office of Early Childhood, so we work very closely together on all kinds of aspects of implementing CCDF, health and safety and quality. I'm not sure exactly what is meant by the quality assurance work. Do you mean specifically? I guess I'm just not sure. Could somebody be a little more specific about that?
Yeah, we'll get further clarification.
Okay.
I don't see any in the chat box right now, but we'll ask that. I'm sorry, here. How do they partner with you? So what you're saying is that you work closely together?
We do. I mean, we're closely together on implementing all the health and safety aspects around training, around inspections for those that are licensed exempt. They're not as involved in the sort of professional development delivery system. So I guess I'm just still not, I mean, I think there's probably something more specific behind this question that I'd be glad to answer.
Okay.
And
well, if we get more information.
Okay.
We'll forward it to you, and then we'll send out an answer to our participants. I'm going to go ahead and bring our session to a close today, but first I'd really like to share our thanks and appreciation to Amanda and Harriet and Erica for joining us today and helping us reintroduce these new resources. And a special thanks to Jen Bender for our technology support. If you have questions about the products or additional questions about the webinar today, feel free to contact us at the Quality Assurance Center at ECETTA.info, and the email address is on the slide here. And we want to thank you for joining the webinar today. We hope that you find these resources useful in your work in supporting family child care and building access and sustainability. You're going to receive a quick survey as soon as the webinar ends, so I hope that you'll take just a few minutes to respond to the survey questions This will help us continue to improve our resources as well as our webinar presentations. We do value and appreciate your input and certainly your participation in the webinar. And we hope that you have a good afternoon and a wonderful and safe holiday. Thank you.